It was early morning in the quiet countryside of Nebraska. The sky was pale gray and the wind carried the smell of wet soil after last night's rain. Ethan Marsh walked out of his small farmhouse with a cup of coffee in his hand, ready to start another ordinary day. The world around him was silent except for the soft clucking of hens and the creak of the old wooden porch under his boots. He had lived alone for years now, ever since his wife passed away. Life had slowed down to the rhythm of chores, sunrises, and sunsets. Ethan was a man of habit. Every morning he walked to the barn to feed his horses and check on the hay bales stacked neatly inside. The barn was old but strong, painted red long ago, now faded to the color of rust. He knew every inch of it, every nail, every smell of straw and dust. But that morning something felt a little different. As he pushed open the barn door, it groaned louder than usual. The horses stirred softly, shifting their hooves. Ethan noticed that the hay near the corner looked uneven, as if something or someone had been there. He frowned but didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a stray cat had wandered in during the night. He stepped inside, brushing off the cold air. As he walked closer to the corner, he heard a faint sound, so soft that he stopped to listen. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was more like breathing, quick and shallow. Ethan's hand tightened around his flashlight. He pointed the beam toward the stack of hay. For a moment he saw nothing. Then something moved. At first he thought it was a bundle of clothes. But then a small hand appeared, pale, trembling, covered with dust. Ethan's heart jumped. He moved closer and saw the outline of a little girl curled up beneath the hay, her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her hair was tangled and her clothes were dirty, but her face, when she finally looked up, was filled with pure fear and confusion. Ethan froze. He had no idea what to say. 1,000 questions rushed through his mind, but the only thing he managed to whisper was, "Hey there, are you all right?" The girl didn't answer. Her lips moved a little, but no words came out. She looked scared, like a wild bird caught in a storm. Ethan slowly knelt down, trying not to frighten her more. He noticed something strange around her neck, a small piece of cardboard tied with a thin string. It had only one thing written on it in faded ink: $1. Ethan stared at it, completely confused. Who would put something like that on a child? It didn't make sense. He reached forward gently, but the girl flinched and moved back against the wooden wall of the barn. Ethan pulled his hand away immediately. "All right," he said softly. "I won't come any closer. You're safe here, okay?" She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes big and searching as if trying to decide whether to trust him or run. Ethan could see that she was freezing. Her hands were blue at the fingertips. She didn't have shoes, just torn socks. He took off his jacket and placed it on the ground near her without a word. Then he stood up and said, "I'm just going to get you something warm. You stay right here." He walked quickly back to the house, his heart still racing. He filled a small pot with soup and heated it up, grabbed a blanket from the couch and hurried back to the barn. He didn't know why, but he already felt protective of her, this strange, silent girl with frightened eyes. When he returned, she was still there, exactly as he had left her, watching the door carefully. He placed the bowl of soup on a crate and set the blanket beside it. "It's just food," he said gently. "And a blanket. You can have it if you want." For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she reached out and took the bowl. Her hands shook as she lifted it to her lips. The smell of the soup seemed to comfort her a little. Ethan stood at a distance, not wanting to scare her off. He watched her eat in silence, trying to piece together what could have brought her here. There were no nearby houses except his own, and a few farms down the road. He hadn't heard about any missing child. But the way she looked, tired, scared, and lost, told him that something serious must have happened. After a few minutes, she put down the empty bowl and looked at him again. Her expression had softened just a bit. Ethan gave her a small smile. "My name's Ethan," he said. "Ethan Marsh, what's yours?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the tag hanging around her neck. Her small fingers touched the edge of the cardboard. Then she shrugged, almost as if she didn't know what to say. Ethan sighed. "All right, that's okay," he said kindly. "You don't have to talk now." He noticed that her eyes were beginning to close, heavy with exhaustion. She must have been awake all night. Ethan spread some clean hay nearby and placed another blanket over it. "You can sleep here for now," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you." She hesitated for a second, then slowly crawled over to the spot and lay down. Within minutes, she was asleep. Her breathing evened out, calm and soft. Ethan stood there watching her, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Confusion, worry, and something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. He turned off the light and walked back to his house. The morning sun was climbing higher now, touching the frost on the grass. But Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the girl. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why did someone leave her in his barn with that strange tag? He made a call to the sheriff's office later that morning, reporting that he had found a lost child on his property. The deputy said they'd send someone to check it out, but Ethan knew how things worked in small towns. Sometimes help took a while to come. In the meantime, he decided to make her comfortable. He brought warm clothes from the house, some old flannel shirts, socks, and a pair of slippers that had belonged to his late wife. When the girl woke up, she looked surprised to see them, but Ethan just smiled and said, "They're clean and warm. You can keep them if you'd like." She took them silently, still unsure but less afraid than before. Over the next few hours, Ethan tried to keep busy, fixing things around the barn, checking the animals, pretending everything was normal. But his mind kept drifting back to her, the look in her eyes, the way she clutched that old blanket as if it were the only safe thing in the world. By evening, the sheriff hadn't arrived. Ethan cooked dinner and brought her a plate. This time she was sitting up when he entered, watching him carefully but without fear. She ate slowly, and for the first time she whispered something. Her voice was barely a sound. Ethan leaned closer. "Thank you," she said. It was only 2 words, but to Ethan it felt like the beginning of something important. He nodded and said, "You're welcome." That night he checked on her one last time before going to bed. The barn was quiet, the air cool and still. She was asleep again, the blanket pulled up to her chin, the small tag lying beside her on the hay. Ethan picked it up and looked at it under the dim light. The ink had faded, but the number 1 was still clear. He turned it over, but the back was blank. He slipped the tag into his pocket, then looked at her once more before closing the door softly behind him. As he walked back to the house, the stars were coming out, bright and scattered across the dark sky. For years, Ethan had lived in silence, his heart shut off from the world, but now there was a strange feeling rising inside him, something he hadn't felt since the day his wife was alive. Hope. He didn't know who the girl was, or what her story would turn out to be, but deep down Ethan knew one thing for certain: finding her was no accident. She had come into his life for a reason, and somehow she was about to change it forever. The next morning, the air was cool and clear. Sunlight filtered through the barn's small windows, turning the dust in the air into soft golden sparkles. Ethan stepped quietly inside, carrying a tray with breakfast, a few pancakes, an apple, and a cup of warm milk. He wasn't sure if the girl would still be there. Some part of him feared that she might have slipped away during the night, but there she was, sitting cross-legged on the hay, holding one of his old flannel shirts close around her shoulders. When she saw Ethan, she didn't hide this time. Her big brown eyes followed him carefully, curious but calm. "Morning," Ethan said softly, setting the tray on a crate near her. "Got you something warm to eat." She looked at the food for a long moment before picking up a piece of pancake. She ate slowly, as if she hadn't tasted real food in days. Ethan sat on an old stool nearby, pretending to be busy tying a rope, just to make her feel less watched. After a while, she spoke again. Just one word. "Lila," she said quietly. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Lila," he repeated with a smile. "That's your name?" She nodded slightly. Her voice was small, but there was a calmness in the way she said it, as if she had finally decided she could trust him, at least a little. "Well, Lila," Ethan said kindly, "that's a beautiful name. You can stay here as long as you need to, all right? Until we figure out what's going on." Lila didn't say anything more, but for the first time a tiny smile appeared on her lips. Over the next few days, they settled into a quiet rhythm. Ethan would bring her meals, fresh clothes, and sometimes sit with her, while she drew in an old notebook he'd found in a drawer. Lila liked to draw, and she drew animals, trees, little houses, and sometimes people. Her drawings were simple but full of emotion, like she was telling stories through pictures instead of words. One afternoon, while Ethan was fixing a fence outside, he saw her walking slowly toward the open field. She stopped near the edge where the tall grass swayed in the wind and lifted her face toward the sky. The sunlight fell on her hair, and for a moment she looked almost peaceful, like a child who had finally found a safe place to breathe. Ethan watched from a distance, smiling. It had been years since his farm had felt alive with laughter or movement. After his wife's passing, the silence had been heavy. But now even the air seemed lighter. The chickens followed Lila around as she scattered seeds, and the horses neighed softly when she passed by the barn. That night, while Lila slept, Ethan sat by the window with a cup of coffee and thought about calling the sheriff again. They still hadn't sent anyone, and part of him didn't mind. He wanted to give her time to feel safe, to open up. He couldn't shake the image of that strange tag around her neck. It made no sense, and the more he thought about it, the more questions filled his mind. The next morning, Ethan decided to take a gentle step forward. He brought a small stack of picture books from the house and laid them on the table. "I figured you might like these," he said. "They used to belong to my wife's niece." Lila's face lit up when she saw the colorful covers. She ran her fingers over one of the books and then looked up at him. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried a warmth that made Ethan's heart ache in the best way. He nodded. "You're welcome, kiddo." Days turned into weeks. Lila began to help around the farm in small ways. She fed the chickens, carried buckets of water, and brushed the horses with slow, careful hands. She rarely spoke, but her silence was no longer fearful. It was peaceful, like she was finally learning how to live without fear of the next moment. Sometimes, when Ethan worked in the fields, she'd sit nearby and draw in her notebook. Once he asked what she was drawing. She turned the page around and he saw a picture of a barn with two figures standing beside it, one tall, one small. He smiled quietly. "That's us, huh?" he asked. She nodded, her cheeks turning pink. One afternoon, a storm rolled in suddenly. The sky darkened and the wind picked up. Ethan rushed to get the animals safe inside, and Lila helped him without being told. She held onto a small lantern, guiding the light while he closed the barn doors. When the thunder rumbled, she flinched and dropped the lantern. Ethan quickly caught it before it hit the ground. "Hey, it's all right," he said softly. "It's just thunder. It can't hurt you." But Lila's eyes were wide and her breathing quickened. Ethan set the lantern aside and knelt down beside her. "You're safe here," he said. "I promise." She looked at him for a moment, then took a deep breath and nodded. That night, after the storm passed, Ethan noticed a new drawing in her notebook. It showed rain falling over a barn, with light glowing from inside. Above it, she had written a single word in shaky letters: safe. Ethan didn't ask what it meant. He already knew. Still, there was something about her that didn't stop puzzling him. She never talked about where she came from. Whenever he asked simple questions like, "Do you have family?" or "Where did you live before?" she would grow quiet, her eyes turning distant like she was seeing something far away. Ethan didn't press her. He figured she would speak when she was ready. One morning, while cleaning the barn, he found something under the hay near the corner where she used to sleep, a small torn piece of paper. It looked like it had been part of a tag or label. On it, there were faint letters that looked like part of a name or a place, but most of it was unreadable. He decided not to show her just yet. Instead, he called a friend, Mary Walters, the local social worker. She was kind and had helped him years ago when his wife was ill. Ethan told her what had happened. "She's safe here," Ethan said. "She eats well, helps around, but I think she's been through something. I just don't want to scare her." Mary's voice was calm. "You did the right thing, Ethan. Let me come by quietly, maybe talk to her." "No pressure. We'll take it slow." They agreed she'd visit in a few days. Ethan didn't tell Lila right away. He didn't want her to worry. He wanted her to know that not everyone in the world was unkind. That evening, he found her sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset. The sky was painted in colors of orange and pink, and the fields looked peaceful again after the storm. Ethan sat beside her and handed her a cup of warm cocoa. She sipped quietly for a while, then spoke without looking at him. "Do you live here alone?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, been that way for a few years." She looked down at her cup. "It's nice here," she whispered. "It feels like home," Ethan smiled. "Well, it can be your home for as long as you need," he said softly. Lila turned her head and looked at him with a small smile, the kind of smile that carried gratitude too deep for words. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window again, watching the stars. He thought about how life had changed so suddenly, from quiet loneliness to this gentle companionship that brought meaning back into his days. He didn't know who had left Lila in his barn or why, but he was certain of one thing. Finding her wasn't random. She had walked into his life like a small miracle wrapped in mystery. The next morning, Lila surprised him. On the kitchen table, she had left a little note, a drawing of a big heart, a barn, and the words, "Thank you for letting me stay." Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at it. He pinned it to the refrigerator door. Later that day, as he fixed the gate, Lila ran up to him holding her notebook. "Look," she said, her voice brighter than ever. On the page was a new picture, 2 people planting seeds in a field. Above it she had written in simple letters, "New beginning." Ethan smiled, his throat tight with emotion. "That's exactly what it is," he said. And though he didn't yet know it, the mystery of the little girl in his barn was only beginning to unfold. One quiet day, one honest smile, and one simple word at a time. Days passed peacefully on the farm. The sky stayed clear. The fields shone in shades of gold, and Lila's laughter began to echo softly through the open air. Ethan found himself looking forward to each morning again. He'd wake up, pour 2 cups of milk instead of 1, and head to the barn knowing that someone would be waiting for him. Lila had become part of his days as naturally as the sunrise. She helped him feed the horses, collected eggs from the hen house, and liked to walk by the river that ran behind the farm. Sometimes she sang to herself, small, tuneless songs that carried softly in the wind. Ethan didn't recognize them, but they made him smile. Still, in quiet moments, he could see there was something heavy inside her. There were times when she'd stop suddenly, as if lost in thought, her eyes clouded. She never talked about where she came from or what had happened before she arrived at his barn. Ethan didn't push. He had learned that silence, when respected, could heal too. One afternoon, Mary, the social worker, arrived at the farm. Ethan met her at the porch and explained softly that Lila was shy and still learning to trust. Mary smiled kindly and said she'd take her time. When Lila saw the woman, she hesitated but didn't run away. Mary sat beside her on the porch steps holding a cup of cocoa and began with simple questions about the animals, the drawings, her favorite foods. Lila answered a few, but when Mary gently asked where she had lived before, the little girl went quiet and turned her face away. Mary didn't insist. Instead, she told her a small story about a bird that had flown far from home and found a kind man who gave it shelter until it was ready to fly again. Lila listened carefully. When the story ended, she looked up at Mary and said softly, "The bird must have been scared." Mary smiled. "Yes," she said, "but it found the right place to rest." After that visit, Ethan noticed that Lila became more open. She still didn't talk much about the past, but she started to share small memories. The color of a blanket she once had, the sound of a lullaby someone used to sing. They were little pieces, but they told him she was slowly letting go of her fear. One evening, while Ethan was repairing a broken fence, Lila sat on the grass drawing something in her notebook. When he finished, he walked over and sat beside her. She quickly closed the book, but Ethan smiled and said gently, "You don't have to hide it. I won't laugh." Lila hesitated, then opened it again. On the page was a drawing of a van, 2 tall figures and a small child in the middle. Above them, she had written 3 shaky words, "Don't forget me." Ethan stared quietly at the picture, unsure of what to say. Layla looked down, her hands shaking slightly. "Did you draw this from memory?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I saw it once," she said in a whisper. Before I came here." Her voice trembled, and Ethan realized it was hard for her to speak. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to talk about it if it hurts," he said. Leela looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I don't remember everything," she said, "but I remember the van, and the people didn't smile." Ethan's heart ached for her. He didn't know the details, but he could feel the weight of whatever she had gone through. He decided to tell Mary what Lila had drawn, hoping it might help find where she came from. That night, after Lila went to sleep, Ethan called Mary again. She listened carefully as he explained the drawing and the few words Lila had said. Mary sighed. "It sounds like she might have been taken from somewhere or lost," she said. "I'll check with nearby towns." Maybe someone's looking for her. Ethan nodded. Please keep me updated, he said. She's doing better now. I don't want her to go through anything hard again. I understand, Mary replied. You've done something good, Ethan. You gave her safety. After the call, Ethan walked quietly to the barn and looked in through the small window. Lila was fast asleep, hugging one of the stuffed animals he had found for her. The moonlight shone across her face, soft and peaceful. Ethan smiled and whispered, You're safe now, kiddo. I promise. Over the next few weeks, life on the farm felt lighter. Lila's drawings filled pages, happy pictures now, fields, sunshine, birds, and animals. One morning, she ran to Ethan with excitement. Look, she said, showing him a drawing of a garden full of flowers. Can we make one like this? Ethan laughed. Why not? We have the land and I've got plenty of seeds. Together they planted rows of daisies, tulips, and marigolds near the front porch. Lila loved watering them each morning, talking to the plants as if they could hear her. Ethan would watch from the steps, thinking how something so small could bring so much life back into a place that had once been so lonely. One afternoon, Mary returned with gentle news. Ethan, she said, we found a possible match from a report in another county. A little girl named Lila went missing months ago, but I need to confirm if it's the same child. Ethan's heart skipped. He knew this moment would come, yet a part of him wasn't ready. Lila had become like family to him, a light in the quiet days. Will she have to leave? He asked quietly. Mary placed a hand on his arm. We don't know yet. We'll talk to her first. That evening, Mary sat with Lila again and gently showed her a picture of a house. Does this look familiar to you? She asked. Lila stared at it for a long moment, her eyes narrowing in confusion. Then she shook her head. No, she whispered. I don't remember. Mary nodded softly. That's okay. We'll take things slow. After she left, Lila seemed quieter than usual. Ethan noticed it right away. He joined her on the porch as she watched the sunset. You're thinking about what she said, huh? He asked kindly. Lila nodded. What if they find my old home? Ethan took a deep breath. Then we'll see what's best for you. But remember, you have a home here too for as long as you need it. Lila looked up at him and smiled faintly. You really mean that? I do, Ethan said. You're safe here, always. That night, while the wind rustled outside, Lila drew another picture, this time of two hands holding each other. Underneath, she wrote, Thank you for finding me. When Ethan saw it the next morning, he didn't say anything. He simply placed the drawing in a frame and hung it in the kitchen. It reminded him of something his wife used to say. Sometimes the people we're meant to save find us first. As the days went by, more pieces of Lila's story began to unfold. She remembered small things. A teacher's voice, the smell of cookies baking, a park with red swings. Mary helped gather those clues, but she never rushed. She knew the heart heals slowly. Ethan, meanwhile, began to notice something in himself too. He felt alive again, not just surviving, but truly living. The quiet grief that had once filled his farmhouse had turned into laughter, the kind that warmed even the coldest corners. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the fields, Lila looked at him and said softly, I think you were lonely before I came. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, he said honestly. I guess I was, she smiled. Me too. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the crickets. Then Ethan said, You know, Lila, sometimes people find each other when they need it most. You found me just as much as I found you. Lila thought for a moment, then nodded. Maybe that's true. That night, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Whatever mystery surrounded Lila's past, it didn't matter as much now. What mattered was that she was here, smiling, growing, and finally learning what safety and kindness felt like. And though neither of them knew it yet, the picture she drew of that van, the one that haunted her dreams, would soon bring answers neither of them expected. But for now, the farm was quiet and life was good. The stars shone bright above, and in that stillness, both Ethan and Lila finally felt what they had been searching for all along: belonging. Spring arrived gently that year. The fields around Ethan's farm turned green again, and the trees began to bloom with small white flowers. The air smelled fresh, and the sound of birds returned after the long, quiet winter. For Ethan and Lila, it felt like a new beginning. The garden they had planted months ago was now full of color. Lila loved waking up early to water the flowers, talking softly to them as if they could hear her. "Good morning, little ones," she would whisper, smiling as drops of water sparkled on the petals. Ethan often watched her from the porch, a soft smile spreading across his face. It amazed him how much the farm had changed since she came. Everything seemed brighter, more alive. Even the old house seemed to breathe again. Ethan noticed how much Lila had grown since the day he found her in the barn. Her cheeks were no longer pale, and her eyes, once full of fear, now carried warmth. She still had quiet moments when she'd stare out the window for a long time, but they didn't seem as heavy as before. Mary visited the farm often now. Each time she brought gentle questions and warm smiles. Slowly, she and Lila had built a friendship. Sometimes they would sit under the big oak tree and draw together while Ethan worked nearby. One afternoon, Mary came with some news. She had found records from another town and thought she might have discovered where Lila came from. Ethan listened carefully as she explained that there was a small community not too far away that had reported a missing girl about a year ago. "I don't want to frighten her," Ethan said. "She's finally smiling again." "I know," Mary said softly. "That's why we'll take it slow. She doesn't have to leave right away. But it's good for her to know that people cared enough to look for her." When Mary gently shared the news with Lila later, the girl grew quiet. She didn't cry or ask questions. She just sat there, holding her drawing book close to her chest. That evening, Ethan found her sitting alone in the barn, tracing her fingers over the old wooden walls. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked, sitting down beside her. She nodded but didn't speak. After a moment, she said, "If I have another home, does that mean I have to leave here?" Ethan felt a small ache in his chest. He didn't know how to answer right away. "Lila," he said softly, "sometimes life gives us more than one home. And sometimes people come into our lives to stay, even if things change a little." She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "So even if I go, I can still come back?" Ethan smiled gently. "Always." The days that followed were peaceful again, but something in the air felt different. It was as if both of them knew that change was near, yet neither wanted to speak of it. Ethan focused on the farm, fixing fences, mending the roof, planting more crops. Lila kept busy drawing, filling her notebook with pictures of everything she loved about the farm. The horses, the old barn, the field by the river, and the two of them planting flowers side by side. One morning, Lila showed Ethan a new drawing. It was a big tree with birds flying around it. Beneath the tree, she had drawn a small barn, and inside it, a girl holding a heart in her hands. "What does it mean?" Ethan asked. She smiled. "It means this is the place where my heart learned to be brave." Ethan couldn't find words for a moment. His eyes grew soft and he said, "That's a beautiful way to put it, Lila. You've got a poet's heart." Later that week, something unexpected happened. Mary called Ethan early one morning. "We found someone who may know Lila," she said. A woman from a nearby town saw a photo of Lila's drawings and recognized them. She used to teach art classes for children. She believes Lila was one of her students. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure?" "She's not completely certain," Mary said, "but she'd like to meet her." They agreed to arrange a small visit, nothing official, just a friendly meeting at the farm. Ethan wanted it to feel safe for Lila. When he told her about it later that day, she seemed nervous at first, but then she said, "If she really knew me, maybe she can tell me something I forgot." The next afternoon, the woman arrived. Her name was Clara, kind-eyed and gentle with a soft voice. When she saw Lila, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "Lila." "It's really you." Lila froze. She looked at the woman for a long time, her brows furrowed as if she was searching through old memories. Then slowly she said, You painted with me once." Clara nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "Yes, sweetheart. Every Wednesday, you loved to draw flowers and birds." Ethan stood quietly nearby, his heart both heavy and full. Lila seemed calm, though her hands trembled slightly. Clara didn't push her. She simply talked about old art lessons, the little projects they did, and how kind Lila had been to the other children. After a while, Lila smiled faintly. "I remember the paints," she said. "They smelled funny." Clara laughed softly. "That's right. You used to wrinkle your nose at them." It was a warm meeting. There were no tears, no hard questions. just the gentle recognition of a memory found again. Clara promised to visit again soon, and when she left, Lila seemed lighter. That night, Ethan found her sitting by the window looking out at the stars. "You did good today," he said. "I know that wasn't easy," Lila nodded. "It felt strange," she said, "but also good. Like I found a small piece of my story." Ethan smiled. "That's what life is, finding one piece at a time." She looked at him for a moment and then said quietly, "Ethan, if they find my real family, will you still be my friend?" Ethan's voice softened. "Lila, I'll always be more than your friend. You're family to me now." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but something deeper. "Then I'm not scared anymore," she said. The next few weeks were filled with more visitors, gentle talks, and new discoveries. Clara brought old photos and small art pieces from the class. Lila recognized a few, slowly connecting pieces of her past with the life she had now. Each time Ethan was there beside her, steady as ever, his quiet strength keeping her grounded. But while her memories returned, her heart stayed at the farm. She loved the horses, the garden, and the peaceful rhythm of life there. One evening, she told Ethan, "When I draw now, I don't just think about the past. I think about tomorrow, too." Ethan nodded, smiling at her words. "That's how you know you're healing, kiddo." One morning, a letter arrived from the family who had been searching for Lila. It explained that her relatives lived in a nearby town and had been hoping for years to find her. Mary arranged a careful meeting for the future, but she made sure Lila would have time to prepare. Ethan read the letter quietly, his hands still. He was happy that Lila would know her family, but his heart ached at the thought of her leaving. That evening, he sat with her by the porch, watching the sunset glow over the fields. "You've come a long way, Lila," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." She leaned against him, her small hand resting on his arm. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You helped me feel safe." Ethan smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "You helped me too. You brought life back into this place, and into me." As the sun sank below the horizon, they sat in silence, knowing that change was near but not afraid of it. Because now they both understood something they hadn't before. Home wasn't just a place. It was the people who made you feel whole. And no matter where Lila's path led next, she knew that a part of her heart would always stay there, in the little red barn where she had been found, and in the man who had chosen kindness when the world had turned its back. Summer arrived with long, golden days and soft, quiet nights. The fields around Ethan's farm were full of color, and the air smelled sweet with wildflowers and fresh grass. It had been months since Ethan first found Lila in his barn, but it felt to both of them as if they had known each other forever. The garden they planted was now in full bloom. Every morning, Lila picked fresh flowers and placed them in a glass jar on the kitchen table. "So the house always smiles," she'd say. Ethan would laugh softly every time she said it. The little house, once so silent and lonely, now felt alive, filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of two souls who had healed each other without even realizing it. But change was coming. Mary came to visit one morning, her car kicking up dust on the dirt road. She stepped out with a gentle smile, holding a letter in her hand. Ethan knew by the look in her eyes that this was important. "Ethan," she said, "Lila's relatives are ready to meet her. They've been waiting for this day for a long time. I wanted to give you both time to prepare." Ethan nodded slowly. He had known this would happen eventually. Still, a quiet ache settled in his chest. He looked toward the garden where Lila was sitting on the ground, drawing something in her notebook. "Will she have to leave right away?" he asked softly. "Not unless she wants to," Mary said. "But they'd love to meet her soon. They live just a few towns over. Kind people, gentle and patient. They only want her to be happy." Ethan managed a small smile. "That's all I want too." That evening, Ethan told Lila about the letter. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset melt into soft orange and pink. She listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "They want to meet me?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "They've been looking for you for a long time." Lila stayed silent for a while, staring at the fields. "Will I have to go live with them?" Ethan took a deep breath. "That's up to you. You'll get to meet them first. And no matter what happens, you'll always have a place here." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering in the golden light. You mean it? I do, Ethan said softly. This farm is as much yours as mine. You changed this place, Lila. You made it feel like home again. Lila leaned her head against his arm. You changed my life too, she whispered. When the day of the meeting came, Ethan drove Lila to a small park in town. The sun was bright, and children played on the swings nearby. Mary was already there waiting with a couple, a kind-looking woman and a man with gentle eyes. They stood up as Ethan and Lila approached, the woman's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Lila. She knelt down and smiled. You look just like I remembered, she said softly. I'm your Aunt Sarah, and this is your Uncle Ben. Lila stood still for a moment, unsure what to do. But there was something warm in the woman's voice, something familiar. Slowly, she took a step forward. Aunt Sarah? She repeated, almost in disbelief. The woman nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. Yes, sweetheart. Ethan watched quietly, his heart full. Lila hugged Sarah, her small arms wrapping tightly around her. It was the first time Ethan had seen her hug someone like that. Without fear, without hesitation. Ben placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We're so glad you're safe, he said softly. The meeting lasted for hours. They talked, shared old photos, and told stories. Lila learned that her parents had passed away years ago, and her aunt and uncle had been trying to find her ever since. Hearing that made her eyes grow misty, but she didn't cry. Instead, she held Ethan's hand and whispered, It's okay. I'm not alone anymore. When it was time to leave, Sarah said they didn't want to rush anything. She can visit us first, she said kindly. We just want her to know we're here. Ethan smiled in relief. That sounds perfect, he said. That evening, back at the farm, Lila was quiet but peaceful. She sat by the window watching the stars. Ethan joined her with 2 mugs of warm milk. Did you like them? He asked gently. Lila nodded. They're kind. I could feel it. Ethan smiled. I'm glad. She turned to him after a long pause. If I go stay with them, will you miss me? Ethan looked into her eyes and said honestly, Every single day. Lila smiled faintly. I'll miss you too. She looked back out at the sky, then whispered, Do you think people meet for a reason? Ethan nodded slowly. I do now, he said. Some people come into your life to teach you something. Some come to remind you what love feels like. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. Then you came to remind me, she said softly. Ethan smiled, his heart full. And you reminded me too. Over the next few weeks, Lila spent time visiting her aunt and uncle. They lived in a small, cozy house near the town. They had a garden too, though not as big as Ethan's. Each visit made her more comfortable, and she began to laugh more freely. But she always came back to the farm with stories to tell. Stories about her new room, her aunt's cooking, and the little cat that followed her everywhere. Ethan listened with pride, even though part of him missed her deeply every time she was away. Still, he never let her see his sadness. He wanted her to feel brave and happy, wherever she was. One day, when she came back for a visit, she handed him a small envelope. I made this for you, she said. Inside was a drawing, a picture of the barn, the fields, and 2 people standing side by side under the open sky. Above them, she had written one word. Family. Ethan's eyes grew misty. This is the best gift I've ever received, he said quietly. Lila smiled, her eyes shining. Then it's yours forever. Weeks turned into months. Lila finally decided to live with her aunt and uncle full-time, but she visited the farm often. Every time she came, she ran straight to the barn first, her old home, and left little drawings on the table for Ethan to find later. Some showed the farm in sunlight, others showed them both laughing near the garden. One morning after one of her visits, Ethan found a new drawing taped to the barn door. It showed a small tag torn in half, the same kind that had once hung. around her neck, but now it had a single word written across it: free. Ethan stood there for a long time, his eyes glistening. He smiled, folded the drawing carefully, and placed it inside his old journal. Life went on, simple and quiet, but no longer lonely. Lila still came every weekend. She helped with the garden, brushed the horses, and told Ethan about her new school. They wrote letters when she couldn't visit, each one filled with stories and little doodles. Years later, when Lila grew older, she often told people about the man who had found her in his barn and changed her life. But what she didn't always say was how much she had changed his. Ethan's farm became a place of light and laughter again. The barn that once held silence now held memories, of kindness, of second chances, and of the kind of love that asks for nothing in return. And sometimes, when the wind passed softly through the open fields, Ethan would look toward the barn and smile, hearing a faint echo of a little girl's laughter, a sound that would forever remind him that the smallest acts of compassion could change not just one life, but two. Because the day he found that frightened girl with a tag around her neck was the day both of their lives began again. And in the quiet glow of every sunset after, Ethan Marsh would whisper the same words to the open sky, the same words he once said to her on the porch so long ago: "You're home, kiddo. You always will be."